Hello, my spooky friends, and welcome back, or welcome to my channel. I am so happy to see you today, as today we have another true crime ASMR video for you to enjoy. So today we will be diving in to the Snowtown Murders. The Snowtown Murders, also known as the Bodies in Barrels Murders, were a series of murders committed by John Bunting, Robert Wagner, and James Vlassakis between August of 1992 and May 1999. A fourth person, Mark Haydon, was convicted of helping to dispose of the bodies. The trial was one of the longest and most publicized in Australian legal history. As always, I will be adding this case to my True Crime ASMR series playlist, where you can find past and future videos in this series. Now, let's get into it. So, as always, we will begin with the persons involved in this case. And it's very important to note how all of these people are linked. I will say that before we get into it. So, several individuals were involved in the murders. There were several other persons who had acted as accomplices in the murders or in the disposal of the bodies as well. So John Bunting, Robert Wagner, and Mark Haydon were all charged with the killings, and James Vlassakis pleaded guilty to 4 murders and provided testimony in exchange for a lesser sentence. So, John Justin Bunting, who we will refer to as John or Bunting moving forward, he is the proclaimed leader of this operation, and he was born on September 4th, 1966. And he was really the driving force behind these murders. John had a lot of trauma from his childhood that we will see become very relevant in who he chose as his victims. When John was 8 years old, he was beaten and sexually assaulted by a friend's older brother. He is reported to have enjoyed weaponry, photography, and anatomy. He grew to develop a strong hatred of pedophiles and homosexuals. At age 22, Bunting worked at a slaughterhouse and reportedly bragged about slaughtering animals, saying that's what he enjoyed the most. In 1991, Bunting would move to a house in Salisbury North and would soon make friends with his neighbors, Robert Wagner and Mark Haydon. Bunting lived in Murray Bridge, South Australia, from November 1991 until he moved to Burdekin Avenue in May 1997. This is where he remained until September of 98. Two of his victims were found in the backyard of his former home in Salisbury North, with the remaining 8 discovered in a vault of a disused bank rented by Bunting and Mark Haydon in Snowtown, South Australia, only 87 miles from where they were. Bunting insisted on playing the 1994 live album Throwing Copper during his murders. So, what is very prevalent in this case is Bunting's, he was the one who picked the victims. Bunting had a rock spider wall is what they call it, but on a wall of a spare room in his house, he created this chart, created using paper notes and wool, where he made this little web, of names of people that Bunting suspected to be pedophiles or homosexuals. At times, Bunting would randomly select a name from the wall and call them, and would insinuate that they were pedophiles and would get what's coming to them. Bunting was married to Elizabeth Harvey, who was the mother of the co-offender James Vlassakis, and Bunting spent a lot of time with him and really assumed a role of a father figure. Bunting regularly communicated to Vlassakis his hatred for pedophiles and homosexuals. Vlassakis would then confide in Bunting that his stepbrother, Troy Yode, had molested him at the age of 13. Bunting replied by suggesting that Yode should be killed. So, we had very briefly touched on Wagner. Now, Wagner lived with Barry Lane, who assisted Bunting in disposing of his first victim. Wagner would later assist Bunting in the remaining murders, so he got a taste and liked it. Bunting's murder spree began in August of 1992 with the murder of Clinton Trezise. Trezise was 22 years old and was bashed to death with a shovel in Bunting's living room after Trezise had been invited inside for a social visit. Bunting accused him of being a pedophile and referred to him in conversations after his murder as Happy Pants. Trezise was found buried 2 years after his murder in a shallow grave on August 16th of 94. It was another 3 years before Bunting would murder again. Trezise's murder remained unsolved for some time, and in 1997 he was the subject of 2 episodes of the Australian television show Australia's Most Wanted. Bunting watched an episode of the show with Vlassakis and his mother. Bunting boasted to Vlassakis, "That's my handiwork," and revealed to him that he had murdered Trezise while living at Waterloo Corner Road, and that he disposed of Trezise's body in Lower Light with Wagner and Lane's assistance. The next victim, 26-year-old Ray Davis, was an intellectually disabled man that in 1993 had a sexual relationship with Suzanne Allen. Suzanne was Bunting's ex-girlfriend. As Suzanne's grandsons alleged that Ray Davis had made sexual approaches towards them, the relationship came to an end. However, they remained friends, and just before he vanished, he was residing in a caravan that was parked behind Suzanne's house. How could you have a pedophile in your backyard? Like, Suzanne, what are you doing? Anyway, on December 26th, 1995, Suzanne's daughter, Annette Cannon, observed Bunting and Allen cleaning out Davis's caravan. Bunting later admitted to Vlassakis, his stepson, that he had killed Davis on December 25th, 1995. He recounted how Vlassakis' own mother and Bunting's wife, Elizabeth Harvey, had stabbed Davis in the leg just before their mutual friend, Robert Wagner, strangled the man to unconsciousness with jumper cables. In court testimony, Vlassakis stated that, according to Bunting's story, Bunting and Wagner loaded Davis's unconscious body into the boot of a Holden Torana. They drove 90 minutes to a residence in the town of Beckera, South Australia. They then tossed Davis into a bathtub and proceeded to bash him in the genitals with the end of a pole, which resulted in his death. On May 26, 1999, the body of Ray Davis was found in a grave filled in by Bunting and Wagner with bricks, soil, and concrete on property previously occupied by Bunting in Salisbury, South Australia. Security cameras caught Bunting accessing Davis's account at multiple banks on several occasions between January and April 1999. next victim is Suzanne Allen. She was 47 years old at the time of her death, and she was found buried at Bunting's house at Salisbury North on May 23rd, 1999. Her body was wrapped in 11 different plastic bags. Her death was concealed by Bunting, and he continued to collect her pension, claiming a total of $17,000. Bunting claimed she had died of a heart attack, although law enforcement suspect that she was murdered when her relationship with Bunting deteriorated. Murder charges regarding the death of Allen were eventually dropped by the prosecution due to lack of evidence, and the perpetrators were tried but not found guilty as a result of a hung jury. Her case was never tried again. The next victim would be 19-year-old Michelle Gardner, formerly Michael Gardner. She was a transgender Australian woman who lived in the residence of Nicole Zurita, who was a cousin of Robert Wagner's wife. Gardner presented as a female, and Bunting referred to her as the biggest homo. Shortly before her disappearance in September 1997, Gardner was playing with Wagner's children in her front yard. Gardner grabbed one of the children and placed her hand over the child's mouth. Wagner saw the incident and became infuriated. Bunting and Wagner took Gardner to Murray Bridge, where they strangled her in a shed, forcing her to stand up each time she collapsed. Wagner and Bunting then staged a robbery at Gardner's home, stealing some of Zurita's belongings and convincing her that Gardner had stolen them in order to pay for a sex change operation. Gardner's body was kept in a barrel in the shed until it was moved to the Snowtown Bank vault before it was found on May 20th, 1999. Her right ear was covered by a slip knot in a rope that was wrapped around her neck. Her left foot had been cut off so that the drum's lid could be shut. Our next victim is 42-year-old Vanessa Lane, who was 42 and was Wagner's ex-partner. Lane was in a relationship with Wagner at the time Bunting first moved to Salisbury North and met them in 1991. Bunting had accepted Lane into his circle of friends because Lane kept him informed of the activities of local pedophiles. After Lane was accused of molesting a local boy, Lane and Wagner's Bingham Road house was firebombed, and Wagner moved out and left Lane. Thomas Eugenio Trevelyan, with whom Lane now had a relationship, moved in with her in April of 1997. According to Lane, the The killing of Trezise left her traumatized. She told her mother and Bunting's ex-girlfriend about the incident, and when they questioned Bunting about Vanessa's statements, he confirmed they were accurate. Trevelyan also told Bunting that Lane had been sexually abusing him. On October 17th, 1997, Bunting, Wagner, and Trevelyan picked up Lane, and on orders from Bunting, Lane called and verbally abused her own mother, and her mother could hear Trevelyan in the background, prompting her with what to say. After telling her mother she was moving to Queensland and wanted nothing further to do with her, she hung up. They tortured Lane for information about her bank accounts, crushing her toe with pliers. Lane was then strangled to death. Bunting assumed control of Lane's vehicle and claimed her welfare payments. On May 20th, 1999, her dismembered body was found by police in a barrel in the bank vault in Snowtown, along with the body of Gardner. Her next victim would be none other than Thomas Trevelyan. Thomas was 18 years old at the time of his death and suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, which led him to believe that he was a soldier. So he always wore army apparel. So, from April to October of 1997, he had lived with Vanessa Lane for a total of 5 months. He then helped Bunting and Wagner kill her. So, on November 4th of 1997, Wagner's girlfriend's son was playing with a dog when Trevelyan began chasing it in an attempt to kill the animal with his knife. He was stopped, but that afternoon, Bunting told others that Trevelyan had started to go mental and that he would be a liability. Trevelyan was then driven on November 5th to Kearsbrook in the Adelaide Hills by Bunting and Wagner. He was made to lean against a box and had a noose put over his neck. Trevelyan was discovered hanging from a tree in Humbug Scrub the following day. Given his history of prior suicide attempts, the coroner determined he had killed himself. Our next victim was 29-year-old Gavin Allen Porter, who was also a diagnosed schizophrenic. He had spent many years in mental institutions. Following the death of his mother in 1997, where he met Vlassakis and moved in with him, the two went down a troubled path together. Both Vlassakis and Porter were heroin addicts. After Bunting, Elizabeth Harvey and her children, including Vlassakis, moved to Murray Bridge, South Australia in late 1997. Porter also moved with them. Bunting referred to Porter as a waste who no longer deserved to live. Bunting was pricked by a used syringe Porter had left on the couch in his living room and decided he should be the next victim. Porter was sleeping in his parked automobile on Bunting's property when Bunting and Wagner attacked him. When Porter awoke, he managed to stab Bunting in the hand with a screwdriver before being overpowered and strangled. Porter's body was displayed to Vlassakis before being put in a barrel for disposal. Porter's body was found on May 20th, 1999. Next was 21-year-old Troy Yode. He was the stepbrother of Vlassakis. And as you may remember, Vlassakis had confided in Bunting that Yode had sexually abused him when he was 13. Bunting and Wagner woke Vlassakis while he was sleeping in his bed and told him they were going to go kill Yode. They beat Yode while he was asleep in bed, and then Vlassakis handcuffed him while the others tied him up. They then dragged him out of bed and forced him into the bathroom, where they beat him once more and demanded his financial information. Bunting used pliers to crush Yode's toes as he coaxed him to repeat a string of numbers, words, and sentences that he had recorded. Yode was killed by strangling. Bunting created messages from Yode and afterwards from subsequent victims to inform friends that they would be going away using these recordings. His body was found on May 20th, 1999. Our next victim is 18-year-old Frederick Robert Brooks, who was the son of Jody Elliott, who was the sister of Haydon's wife. Elliott had moved to South Australia in late 1997 to be near her sister. Bunting became obsessed with the notion that Brooks was touching up young girls and repeatedly told others that something had to happen to him. In September 1998, Brooks was notified that he had been accepted into the Australian Air Force Cadets and was invited to join Bunting, Wagner, and Vlassakis at a party. Vlassakis, Wagner, and Bunting tortured Brooks in a bathtub, and as with previous victims, he was handcuffed and thumb-cuffed. They inserted lit cigarettes into his ears and nostrils and lit a sparkler, which was shoved up his urethra. He was then made to speak into a recording device, divulging his banking information. A syringe was used to inject bleach into his testicles, which were wired to a variac, which was sending electrical impulses through his body. His toes were crushed by pliers before he choked to death on his own puke. Brooks's body was found in a barrel in the Snowtown Bank on the 20th of May, 1999. Our next victim was 29-year-old Gary O'Dwyer, who was a neighbor of Bunting's and was both mentally and physically disabled. Bunting repeatedly called O'Dwyer I don't like that word, but that's what he called him. Bunting enlisted Vlassakis' assistance in October of '98 to learn pertinent details regarding O'Dwyer's financial situation and whether he had any family. O'Dwyer's income from disability benefits was regarded to Bunting as a financial target. At the insistence of Bunting, Vlassakis arranged with O'Dwyer for a couple of friends, which were Bunting, Wagner, and Vlassakis, to have a drink with O'Dwyer in Francis Street. Bunting set out to get O'Dwyer drunk, and after approximately 15 to 20 minutes, Wagner grabbed O'Dwyer around the throat and proceeded to torture him for several hours. O'Dwyer's body was taken to Haydon's home, where it was placed in a barrel. His body was found in the Snowtown bank vault on May 20th of '99. 37-year-old Elizabeth Haydon, who was Mark Haydon's wife and the aunt of Fred Brooks, would be our next victim. Bunting was informed by Mark Haydon that he had informed his wife about the murders. Bunting detested Elizabeth and warned Vlassakis that she was an issue because she was aware of the killings. Wagner had similar feelings about Elizabeth, considering Haydon's wife to be a whore and a lowlife. On November 21st of 1998, Bunting and Wagner arrived at her residence. Her husband and children had gone out for the night, and Elizabeth was dragged to her bathroom, tortured, and murdered. A rope was left around her neck, and a gag had been taped into her mouth. Later that day, when her husband was shown her remains, he laughed. Elizabeth's body was placed in a barrel and found in the Snowtown bank vault. Our last victim was 24-year-old David Johnson, who was one of the stepbrothers of Vlassakis. I'm not sure how many he had, but probably not many after all of this. Bunting did not like Johnson because he was fastidious with his cleanliness and appearance, and Bunting frequently referred to him as a yuppie and a fag. Not saying it out loud, I hate the word. Anyway. Bunting began talking about getting Johnson and suggested that Vlassakis find a way to get him to the bank in Snowtown. On May 9th, 1999, Vlassakis told Johnson that there was a computer for sale for cheap in Snowtown, and he agreed to go with Vlassakis to buy it. He was overpowered as soon as he entered the building. Johnson was the only victim who died in Snowtown, and his body was found in 1999. A piece of flesh from Johnson was fried and eaten by Bunting and Wagner. Initially, the body of Clinton Trezise was found at Lower Light in 1994, although no connection to Bunting was made at this time. Similarly, the death of Thomas Trevelyan in 1997 was initially treated as a suicide. It was police inquiries into Elizabeth Haydon's disappearance which eventually led them to Snowtown. And on May 20th, 1999, the remains of 8 victims were found by the South Australian police in 6 plastic barrels in a disused bank vault. It is believed that the bodies had been held in several locations in South Australia before being moved to Snowtown in '99. Prosecutors believe that the killers moved the bodies after they became aware of the ongoing police investigation. 2 more bodies were found buried in the backyard of Bunting's house in Adelaide. Police later arrested and charged Bunting, Wagner, and Mark Haydon on May 21st of 1999. Vlassakis was arrested later on May 26th of 1999. At the time of the arrest, Vlassakis lived in Bunting's home. The trial of Bunting and Wagner lasted almost 12 months, which was the longest in the history of South Australia. In December 2003, Bunting was convicted of committing 11 murders, Wagner of 10, which he had only confessed to 3. Vlassakis pleaded guilty to 4 murders. In 2004, Haydon was convicted on 5 counts of assisting with the murders, of which he admitted to 2. The jury did not come to a decision on 2 murder charges against Haydon and another charge of assisting murder, at which the senior prosecutor, Wendy Abraham, indicated that she would seek a retrial on those charges. The final count against Bunting and Wagner, that of murdering Allen, was dropped on May 7th of 2009 when the jury was unable to reach a verdict. Justice Brian Ross Martin determined that Bunting was the ringleader and sentenced him to 11 consecutive terms of life imprisonment, without the possibility of release on parole. Wagner was sentenced to 10 consecutive terms under the same conditions, and at his sentencing, he stated from the dock, "Pedophiles were doing terrible things to children. The authorities didn't do anything about it. I decided to take action. I took that action. Thank you." Vlassakis was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences with a non-parole period of 26 years. And Haydon was sentenced to 25 years with non-parole period of 18 years. More than 250 suppression orders prevented publication of the details of this case. In early 2011, a judge lifted the remaining orders in response to a request by the producers of the film Snowtown, which was a dramatization depicting the murders and the events leading up to them. In February 2024, Haydon was granted parole, with authorities citing his excellent behavior in prison. He was released in April and is residing in the Adelaide Pre-Release Center in Northfield as part of the conditions for his parole. So, now we get into my thoughts. These are a lot of men with a lot of issues. I think that Bunting, after his trauma as a child, used that as he couldn't kill who harmed him, so he used that anger on others. And there's a lot of mental health issues involved here. I wish that this had been prevented. I do think that there is a justice system in place so that things like this do not happen, and when they do, I think it's very selfish. These decisions are not for us to make, and it's very entitled and disgusting to think that you have the responsibility of taking people's lives and deciding their punishment for things. Just a lot of disgusting behavior here. And as far as Haydon, as far as I'm concerned, he should have been in there way longer. And them saying he has excellent behavior in prison, he's a psychopath. He was shown a picture of his dead wife's body and laughed. And you can't. The wife stays home and the children and the husband are all out, and then his two best friends come and kill his wife, but he has no idea. Really? Just a lot of weird behavior. And they were going 87 miles. No one saw them. And all these people, so many people that are all close to these people, and nothing. And he was collecting all this money. What did you do with it, Bunting? That's what I want to know. What did you do with it? I think he probably was on drugs too. Because, you have, I believe, it was Vlassakis and Porter, I believe, that were heroin addicts together. And Bunting was stabbed by one of the syringes that was on his couch. So these are active addicts in your home. Just a lot of dots that can be connected here. Sometimes I feel like my thoughts are a little bit of a hot take, and just know that I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm trying to be a place of information and just a place where we can talk about these things. The biggest thing in preventing this from occurring again is awareness, making it known that you cannot do these things and get away with it. Do not let your traumas lead you to putting your hatred out on others. It's very important. So, alright. I will be adding this video, as always, to my True Crime ASMR series playlist. This is where you can find past and future videos in this series. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it informative, relaxing, and just a good old time. I try to provide a relaxing, safe space for you to enjoy, and I hope I do that in each and every video that I upload. If you enjoyed today's video, I highly suggest hitting the like and subscribe buttons below. This is where you can join our little spooky community. It is growing. I enjoy talking to each and every one of you. The love that is in the comments towards each other and towards this channel it's a good place to be. And you are welcome. So, thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you next time. Spooky dreams.